I have a question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you can't find something? You're certain you put it in some general area, but you can't find it. You're looking around the house or the car to no avail. And so then you decide to ask your friend or relative or spouse potentially to help you find this item that you just cannot find. And then once you handed it over to someone else, 5 seconds later, oh, here it is. Have you ever been in that situation when that's happened? And if you're nodding, are you a man? Okay? So that tends to, I don't know, the majority of those situations that I just described tend to be men. I don't know why that is, but that happens a lot with guys. I've noticed that with myself. I don't know how many times I can't find something. Jennifer goes and looks, and 5 seconds later, she finds it. And you know what else? It's always embarrassing, right? Because it wasn't a hard find. In fact, it was right there in plain sight. In fact, I probably looked at it and then went on to look somewhere else, okay? Now, that's actually a brain thing. I don't know if you know about that. It's not just a guy thing. There is something in your brain that says if you're looking in a certain area and it might be there, the item you can't find, you don't know where you put it, you're looking, but because you're convinced, your brain is convinced it's not there, you can look right at it and not see it, okay? It's a brain thing, not just a guy thing. So we can all rally around that, men or women, okay? Now, we're going to talk this morning about looking and seeing. Now, some things aren't a big deal, right? You get over that quickly and you find it, or you get help from somebody else and they help you find it. But there are other examples of looking and not seeing that have larger consequences. So I want to talk about an example of that this morning. Now, this is not Where's Waldo, okay? I had somebody mention that already. And it's kind of a mishmash of weird colors, and you probably can't even see the main person, can you? That's right in the center of the picture. Any idea who it might be? Custer, General Custer. Very good. Bob gets extra points this morning that don't matter. Okay. All right, so it is Custer. And it's weird that I bring up General Custer and a battle on Mother's Day. And I was reminiscing earlier that I bring up weird stuff on Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day, before, I haven't said that yet. Happy Mother's Day. I remember a few years ago, we were going through the book of Revelation. We had come to, chapter by chapter, as we do that a lot. We came to Revelation chapter 17, and it's all about the prostitute of Babylon. And that landed on Mother's Day. And that seemed really weird, but I went ahead with it. Okay, so anyway, that's good or bad, it's kind of what I do. So this morning, we have a image of a battle, a bloody battle for Mother's Day. Now, it seemed to fit in my brain because we're talking about a battle, and we're in Joshua chapter 8 in the fall of Ai. So that's why my brain went to a battle situation. But here's a little background. I don't know if you know about General Custer or not. He lost the Battle of the Little Bighorn. June 25th, so native friends that I have, June 25th is a big day. It's Indian Day, okay? A lot of powwows take place on that day. Why? Because June 25th is the day that Custer lost, okay? So that is a day to celebrate in certain places on reservations. But anyway, here's a little bit of the backstory. One of the a lot of books have been written, a lot of ink spilled on Custer and what happened that day. But here's a little bit part of the story I think is interesting. It fits with our look and see situation. Custer and the 7th Cavalry they were out on a reconnaissance mission. They were trying to figure out where this band of renegade natives were that had left the reservation. So they're out to find them and see what they're up to. So Custer has a number of Indian scouts that he sends out in advance of wherever his regiment is moving. And out in advance of Custer, these Indian scouts come up over a bluff on the Little Bighorn, and they're looking out in the distance, and they see this massive encampment of native people, teepees everywhere, thousands of people out there across the river. This is a warning sign, a big deal, because they are not anticipating coming anywhere near a group that size. That just doesn't happen, okay? So they wait for a while. Custer and the rest of the regiment show up, and the Indian Scouts take Custer up to that bluff, and they point out over that bluff, look and see what's going on. That's basically what they said. Did Custer see it? Well, there's a whole lot of the engagement that day that we don't have history from, at least from the white guys, because they all died. Not all of the Native Scouts died, however, and the story that was handed down from them is this. They point out over that bluff, look and see what's going on over there. This is not a good situation for us to be in. Custer looks and he sees nothing. Why? History will never know. Did he look and actually see it and disregard or ignore what was right there? This is a bad idea to engage this group. Don't do it. Because he was so driven by his ego, we'll never know. Maybe he didn't actually see it. But chances are, and what we know about Custer is he looked and he did see it, and because of his previous experience, he was banking on that group of native warriors to not engage him and defeat him, because he just knew he could defeat anybody. Well, the rest is history. They moved out from there, they engaged, native warriors came out from by the thousands and absolutely wiped them out. That's the rest of history. Sometimes looking and not seeing has minor consequences, little inconvenience. However, other times there are big consequences, maybe even life or death consequences to looking and not seeing what is in front of you. So this morning, we're going to focus on Joshua chapter 8 and what it means to look and to actually see. And immediately, the beginning of this chapter, we're confronted with the imperative from God himself to Joshua to see, to look and to see. See what? Well, let's begin with Joshua chapter 8, verses 1 through 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear and do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai and his people, his city and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoil and its livestock you shall take as plunder for yourselves. Lay an ambush against the city behind it. What are we going to see? Well, there's a number of things we're going to hopefully look and see this morning in chapter 8. And it begins with this. Look and see that there is a fresh start. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you're here, if you're part of where we're at in chapter 7, you know this isn't the first time that the topic of Ai has come up. And in fact, they tried to take this city or this fortified area, whatever it was. We don't know exactly for sure, but they tried to take it once before, and they failed, and men died, and there was sin in the camp, and all of that had to be dealt with. That was chapter 7. They underestimated. They didn't have a clear understanding of what God wanted for them, and all of that really was a bad start because of the sin that was in the camp. So things are about to change. Why? Because of the consecration that we talked about last week, setting themselves apart for God and for Him alone, and that has brought about this change. God is telling Joshua, see, things are different now. What I am calling you into to do is different than where you were at last time. How have things changed? Well, see, he says to Joshua, I am just giving this king into your hands. Well, how's that going to happen? Well, it's different this time. Jericho, as you remember, they had to gather. It was this celebration, worship style march around the city, and then they blew the horn and they shouted and walls came down. Quite an elaborate ceremony that they were a part of. None of that this time. God is doing something completely different with his people in the taking of Ai. No marching around the city, no blowing horns, and also, a stark contrast, they are to ambush the city, which is kind of, what? Sneaky for God to say that, right? Why does he do that? Well, he did it. He told them to do it in that way. And the spoil. They're spoiled this time. They were not to touch anything with Jericho. All of it was devoted to destruction, devoted to God. Yet this time, they can go into that area once it falls and help themselves. There are things that are spoil of war that they can take. Now, it's a rebound opportunity for Joshua and Israel as they enter into this ambush kind of process and strategy that they have. The first point I want you to kind of take in this morning, God works in whatever ways that he wants to work. So that what is true for Joshua and Israel is also true for believers today. If you are expecting, if you're setting aside, if you're consecrating yourself for God, whatever is next, then you also better be ready to see what it is he's doing in that situation. Because why? There's a real good chance it's not going to look like the last time. God can do whatever he wants. And why is that so important? It continually points us back to him and away from us. We're not in charge. To really understand and to be a part of what God is doing that's different, you've got to keep walking by faith. You've got to keep trusting in him. It really isn't, it can't be about me and where I'm at, or the size of my army, or my amazing ability, or whatever my skill and experience level is. None of that matters. This applies really to everything that we face today. God is doing something new and different. Are we aware? And even as the prophet Isaiah said, do you perceive it? Are you listening? Are you looking? Are you seeing what it is that God is doing? That's the first point. Second one is this. We better be looking and seeing an opportunity to step up into. That's what I see happening here with Joshua as we move forward in the story. We have more details in chapter 8 of the fall of Ai than really any other engagement in this book. We are given a lot of detail of what's going on. So we're not going to take the time to read every detail, but I want to give you kind of a summary here that leads up to our next reading. God tells Joshua, set an ambush. So here's what's going on. Joshua starts with a much larger force than the last chapter. The first failed, maybe 10 times as many people. He divides his force in two. He takes the Lord at his word, and he figures out a way to set an ambush. The larger of the two forces is going to be visible by the king of Ai. They're going to be in a place in the valley where the king and his army sees them, and they're going to be setting him up to believe something really that isn't true. And then that smaller force is going to go into hiding. They're going to be in a place where the king and his army, where they can't see them, waiting to launch an ambush in the town. And the ruse works. So the next day, that larger force is visible. They begin to engage, but they begin falling back. What does the king of Ai and his army see? They see the same thing that happened last time. These guys are running again. What a bunch of fools. We're going to take them and we're going to wipe them all out this time. They can't help but pursue them. So they withdraw. Those guys come out. They leave their fortified place, their fortified city. And then we see what's happening with the rest of the story in chapter 8, verses 18. Then the Lord said to Joshua, stretch out the javelin that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the javelin that was in his hand toward the city, and the men in the ambush, that smaller group, right, that the king doesn't know about, the men in the ambush rose quickly out of their place, and as soon as he had stretched out his hand, they ran and entered the city and captured it, and they hurried to set the city on fire. Joshua sticks out the javelin. It's a spear. It's some kind of weapon of warfare. Scholars aren't clear what it is. Maybe it was a banner. It was something big, okay? So as the skirmish is happening, the battle is happening in the valley, he takes that moment in time to stop whatever else he's doing and to shove that banner, javelin, whatever it is, in the sky as a signal for the rest of the guys in that ambush to come out and to begin destroying Ai. And this story, kind of like Custer, the rest is history. They rush in, they take the city, it is completely defenseless, they begin burning it. The king and all his men, they're like, what's that smoke? What's going on? It dawns on them that they were fooled. This would make a great movie, wouldn't it? I mean, when you read the chapter and you hear the story,